Hi everybody, this is Steve Junion. I am sitting outside of lovely Louisville, Kentucky on the way to Cincinnati off of I-71. I am here today to talk about our podcast. And today we don't have a guest. I guess I'm my own guest and I'm going to interview myself. So let's just try that out and see how that works out. A lot of people, my wife, my mom, my kids that are interested in this ask me all the time, what do you do? Son, husband, father. And it's really hard to explain. I finally got a chance to think about it over the last year and a half after doing this for 5 years. And I tell people I facilitate change at the speed of business. Now, what the hell does that mean? I don't really know, but it sounds good. I think what it really means, though, in my head is I help move people not just from A to B, but A to Z and back and forth and iterate and build and destroy and build it back up again. It's a very nebulous process, this world of design. And to be honest with you, I still feel like a neophyte, a newbie, someone that has maybe 5 years of experience and actually longer than that from an instructional systems design, which I figure is the cousin to human-centered design. But I still got a lot to learn, to be a little bit more clear if I can. I really help design. I help facilitate a number of experiences. And I've been doing that for over 30 years, whether it's through leadership, executive development, some of the top programs at large Fortune 50 companies, down to helping people design an experience for conferences, speakers that want to create an experience that is more interactive and engaging. Not one of those, hey, this is going to be a really interactive and engaging class, and then you get a lecture for 8 hours. That's super awesome. Not. I also look at anything that really requires a plan around designing. It should impact the consumer. In a lot of cases, my consumer has been the learner, internally as well as externally. Now my consumer are customers of an organization or future customers of an organization. It also includes, though, the experience of associates, and we're seeing a lot more of that around human-centered design and designing employee engagement, which I still don't know what engagement means, but it sounds fun. Go HR. So what do I believe in terms of design? First of all, I firmly believe that design is really a pathway to really engage people. See, I use that word too. So what does engage mean? I think engagement really stands for meeting people where they're at, really, whether it's an internal associate or whether it's a potential customer, a consumer, or an existing customer. It's really meeting them where they're at and really understanding them and the impact of all the stuff that we do inside our walls. Most of the time it's 4 walls, but if you're at some high-tech companies, you don't have walls. It's a circle. And a lot of times we forget about that customer that pays us $1.99 a month or pays us $300 in premium every month for Medicare Advantage members, or that don't necessarily pay us at all, like a Medicaid member, but really need the services that we provide to stay healthy. And so I think building that pathway, both internally as well as externally, is really critical and important. Okay. The second thing I really believe in is that most people, and work with me here, even our frontline folks who are, by the way, some of the most important people in the organization and many times the lowest paid, which frustrates the bejesus out of me, are actually honestly a little bit afraid to go talk to the customer. I've worked in a lot of call centers. If you put a microphone in me, I kind of sound like Barry White, at least I do in my head. But a lot of times if you take people off the script, they get really, really nervous. Right? They can't just have a regular conversation because they're a customer and we have all these regulations and they're recording us and we've got these times to meet. We can only talk for so long and blah, 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 all sorts of stuff. And some of that is legitimate and some of that is built around ourselves that we create on our own, both individually and organizationally. But we can't be afraid to go talk to our consumers. And I'll use that word from now on. Consumers can mean internal colleagues and associates, future customers and customers. So we'll talk about it from a consumer human-centered perspective. And so we have to really really work with our internal associates, because if I'm in audit and I don't see the value of what I do for that consumer, man, as an organization, we're really missing out. We've got to get that set up. We've got to get that dialed in. And that's what I believe is part of the reason why I do what I do. I do believe, talking about my purpose, is that bringing additional insights from practitioners, people that roll up their sleeves, at least occasionally. I hope to have eventually on this podcast some what I would consider thought leaders. But the people I consider thought leaders are people that are in the trenches day in and day out, that are facilitating this kind of change, that are facilitating the kind of connections to consumers internally and externally, and they believe passionately about what they do, you know? And just because I know something, or I believe something, or I do something in a specific way, hopefully they're going to do it in another way. It makes me look kind of like I can up my game, something that I can learn from and I can benefit from, and hopefully you'll benefit too. But honestly, I'm kind of doing this for me. I'm kind of doing it because I want to learn from other people, and I want them to share their information with you. I'm just the conduit. So am I an expert? Nah. I'd love to think I am. I'm working towards that, but maybe some areas. Some people might say yes. I have huge issues with imposter syndrome, and you'll see that as we go along here. All right. What is this other thing? Oh, okay. The last thing I believe in. Well, I believe in a lot more than this, but I've been restrained by my producer to 5. Thank you, intern Seth. And the last one is really like, we make human-centered design horribly challenging from a nomenclature, from a what we call things, and is journey mapping better than service design, and all this other petty crap. Like I said, I'm sure I've made many mistakes. I actually have a goal every day of making 5 mistakes, and I've already made like 100 today. I'm exceeding my goal significantly. But we do make it hard. I think we make it hard for people from the outside to understand what human-centered design is. I resort at times to telling executives that I try to make healthcare like Disney. Although I think Disney has challenges at times too, and even though they're a leader, I've been there recently. I think they can do more. I think they can step it up, just like I can step it up. But the beautiful thing about Disney and Marriott and some of the big names that we all know, especially Amazon, they're always trying to work on incremental innovations and improvements in the whole consumer experience. By the way, if you want a great experience, go apply for a job at Amazon as a virtual customer service. It is the best interview process, most amazing design of an experience as a potential employee. I actually got hired in Tennessee, but I couldn't move to Tennessee for that job. I actually wanted a virtual customer service job with them over the holidays so I could see what it was like. So if you're listening to Amazon, call me, hire me. I would love to do that in my spare time. I think they've got some great things going on anyways in their whole experience, being a Prime member and a whole bunch of other stuff. Anyways, I don't want this to be an advertisement for them, but it's pretty exceptional. The fact is, we have to make it easier. The tools, the processes, the methodologies, doesn't take a rocket scientist, and I know rocket scientists, to do this. It takes someone that cares. It takes someone that is not afraid to fail, and they have to put themselves out there leading a group of people, as I said before, from A to F, B, G, Y, and so forth. Okay, so in addition to not understanding what I do, and I guess they not understanding, they being friends, family, even coworkers at times, sometimes people I lead, sometimes best friends, sometimes my client will say, "What the hell are you doing?" Or "Why are you doing this?" And what I tell them is, I was born to design experiences. I have actually had more than one person who I thought had an amazing idea for a speech or a topic at a conference. Elizabeth is a great example. She wrote a book. It's a bit sarcastic, humorous book take on HR. It's called True South. And her name is Elizabeth George, and I met with her. I hadn't seen her for a while. She's a former colleague at an insurance company I worked at. And we sat down, and I said, "Hey, Elizabeth, this is an amazing book." I said, "This you've got something here. You've got a platform that you can go out and do workshops, and you can go ahead and do speeches at conferences. And she looked at me like, are you kidding me? And my response was, no, this is great. You've done the hard work, and I sat down with her and I designed a number of different formats, a 30, a 60, a 90-minute, a half-day and full-day workshop with her over, really, I had about 60-70% of it finished within a day, working with her, designing this experience for others that were, concerned about, the subject of HR and the things that HR, and I'm a former HR, I've got my HR badges, and I'm worked in HR a lot in my life in the learning world. But sat down with her and really designed out a number of different experiences, and I love that. There was no charge in it. It was just she was willing to have that conversation and go to places that made her feel uncomfortable. But I've always felt like I was my most creative side because I really suck at painting. I'm an okay singer when the music is up really loud. I sound really good. I just haven't. I love creativity, but I'm not an artist, and so I get that from work. And I think a lot of people who do human-centered design, they get to use a part of themselves that maybe they lost after kindergarten. That got beat out of them in first, second, third grade, and certainly by the time you got to college. Unless you're the guy dancing in the field, then you're in it to win it. So I really look to design and experiences, whether it be for the learner. I spent 30 plus years. I started off as an incredibly horrible trainer in the military and designing to the most simplistic but kind of beautiful model of task condition standard, creating training for the military and facilitating exciting classes on how to keep up your generators, your diesel and gasoline engine generators. I know, I bet you'd all like to go to one of those sessions. I don't. And worked my way through some, by listening and learning from other people, to some really amazing executive development experiences at a couple of Fortune 100 companies. Really lucky and feel really happy that I had the chance to do that. But yeah, I like to design experiences. My favorite thing, and it was actually two things. One of the most favorite things I've ever done, where I was really tested, my director came up to me, and I was working on a women in leadership program. She had the oddest request. She said, I need you to make something for our CFO. He's retiring. I'm like, I'm running women in leadership. What the hell are you talking about? She goes, well, it's his going away party and blah, 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 and all this other stuff. And I can't remember if Deb said we need it like tomorrow or next week. Anyway, I was kind of stuck in the form factor of a laptop or my notebook. And so I got out a big piece of paper and I created like a placemat that as a kid, if you went to Big Boy or to your local drive-in, you'd have a seek and find. You'd have, connect the dots or those kind of fun things. And I actually remember creating that placemat that I think wound up on A3 paper for a CFO, and I found myself again. I had lost that creativity over time, and just by doing that placemat, it was absolutely amazing. And then Deb, who didn't know what the hell to do with me for the first 6 months of our relationship when I worked with her on executive development, gave me another assignment. I think it was a Thursday night or a Friday night. She said, hey, remember, you got that PowerPoint due on Monday. I'm like, what PowerPoint? She goes, for the new leadership center we're building. I'm like, oh, whoa, time out there. What are we talking about? Oh, she goes, oh, I didn't tell you that. I need you to create a document for Roger by Monday. I want to believe it was Friday night because terror hit me. Roger is an amazing leader, and I had a chance to work with him. And at this organization, it was a skyscraper, at least in Louisville, 26 stories, and they were going to rip out an entire story and turn it into a leadership center. Really, really cool. And so I spent the weekend creating a draft, being inspired by the Beatles, of a concept design document that I kind of almost, with a lot of trepidation, presented to Roger on Monday morning. He was an early morning guy, so I think I had a 7:30 meeting with him. And I shared it with him, and he goes, this is awesome. I love this. And I'm telling you, thank God for the Beatles, because I used a couple of lines from a couple of their songs, like Imagine If and What If, and created a very kind of descriptive document. And what that was about, designing that document, I learned later on, Roger used it to sell senior leadership, the executives of the company, to really invest in this. And he also shared it with his team. I found out through one of his team members, who honestly I did not get along with very well, came back to me one day and said, he goes, I don't know how you did this, but Roger held up this document that you created, and he said it's one of the most strategic documents that he's ever seen. And I was just, my mind was just blown. And he wanted some advice on terms of how to create something from a different form factor. I used again an A3 piece of paper and was able to tell a story more visually. Although the first iteration that Roger saw was absolutely horrible. It was actually like iteration 10 over the weekend with several cans of beer. But I was just really excited to hear that come back around a month after I did it. And I got to thank, some people that have taken it to levels that I only hoped to. A good friend of mine at the Boeing company, I remember creating a map of a Facebook tool for Boeing, and that thing was the half a side of a wall, maybe 4 or 5 feet by 3 feet, but it walked through the entire experience of the user. Again, back then we still weren't talking about human-centered design necessarily. Even in my doctorate, which I finished in 2012, we weren't using user experience or user interface, UX UI. We were talking about human-computer interaction. I remember that class. And so it's evolved. The language evolves, the methodologies, the process evolve, and the reason why why I love it, whether it's designing something small or designing solutions for members of a healthcare company having better healthcare outcomes, is because I get to use, and because I don't do this on my own, I work with teams, we get to use our creativity. We get to go back to our kindergarten selves and build models, build tools, build prototypes that we then share with the consumer after we've already gotten input from the consumer on what's important to them. So how did I get here? I was born in the early 70s when disco music was rocking, and I grew up. I grew up in a really interesting environment. In my home in the early 70s, everybody got to camp out. Everybody is my mom, my sister, and my dog Batman, and sometimes Robin. But Robin left this earth a little premature due to a milk truck incident. But we all slept in our living room, and it was like the coolest childhood ever. I mean, we would roll out the cots at night, and we would all snuggle in. We all had our own little cot. Sometimes my mom would sleep on the couch, and we all got to watch a little TV before bed. It was like the coolest childhood at all ever. And I didn't realize it, but we were growing up poor. We didn't have money to heat the house. My mom was too honest. She never lied about how much income she got, even from her cash job. So we didn't get financial assistance. And there were days that we didn't eat. Now, I am kind of a rather big guy at this point in time, so it looks like I haven't missed a meal in my life. But my sister reminds me that there were days that we didn't know if we were going to have food and or where it was come. And as I learned at a healthcare company doing population health work, this is a very very big challenge for much of America around food insecurity. In any case, that was my upbringing, and School was fantastic. I was a solid 2.7 student. None of my family had yet, except for one of my cousins, he's older than I was by about 4 or 5 years, had gone to college. And so, honestly, I had no idea what high school or college was all about. I really was able to get by with not studying a lot, and I've always had a job. I've had a job since the age of 10. So my priorities were friends, having fun, going out, and then about number 10 or 11 was school. I just didn't get it. I didn't get high school. I also didn't get college. College had about the same GPA. I was in high school, and I asked my mom about this recently, and I asked her, I said, did you advise me to do this, or did I do it on my own? And she said, no, you did it on your own. I don't know if I was 12 or 13 or 14, probably around 14 or 15. I found a flyer for this program called Upward Bound. Not the really cool program where you go on a kayak in Canada and learn how to say A appropriately, but one where people who didn't have many resources, who didn't have anybody that went to college, got to study once a week, and you got paid like 10 or 15 bucks. Back in the 80s, that was huge. I could go to study for an hour and a half and make $15, and I got to drive to another town at the age of 15. Back in those days, you just needed a school permit and you were cut loose. And in that summer, I got to spend a summer on a college campus, and it was amazing. It was an experience in and of itself. And in my town growing up, honestly, there was like one black guy in town. There was no diversity. Well, there was diversity, but there was no really fully diverse population in my town. And when I spent that summer at Coe College, I learned that I had no clue how the world worked, But the experience was amazing. They had it set up to where you kind of felt through the work that you did there, which was high school level classes and a college course, that you could actually be successful. I never dreamed of going to college. I didn't even really know what college was. And so this program, Upward Bound, gave me that view into a world that I did not even comprehend. And it was amazing, And when I decided to go to college, because the economy at that time was not great, I chose that college that I spent my one summer at because, again, the experience was amazing. The campus was amazing. And I was moderately successful, not wildly, but moderately successful as a sociology and political science major, double major, with a teaching certification. And damn it, that sociology major is finally paying off. It's taken 25, 30 years. But I got to tell you, I still remember my anthropology classes. I remember studying cultures, individuals, and that whole world about looking and seeing the world from someone else's eyes really, really broadened my perspective of not only the world, but myself as well. All right. So, that sociology degree, as I said, I've used that more in the last 4, 5, 6 years than I have pretty much the entire rest of my life. I had gone to college. I'd been in the military at that point as well. Joined the military about 17. And it wasn't until about 6 months after I graduated from college and had an amazing experience there. I mean, shoot, one class we had, and yes, this is true, it was a class in religion and political science. So the two things you're not supposed to talk about, that was the name of the class. And Bruce Nesmith, Dr. Nesmith, was an amazing mentor and college rock, man. My largest class size was probably 20 people. Now I had $20-some thousand in student loans. I didn't even know what a student loan was. Who knew you had to pay that back? But at that time, I had some amazing professors and I went through the college thing. I did the thing. I got the cap and the gown and I got the piece of paper. But I never understood what college was about until about 6 months after. I was sitting around having some beers with friends, and I was in the middle of taking this really long drink, and I was like, I slammed my beer down, and I was like, man, they tricked me. They tricked me. And my friends were like, do we really have to do that? And I said, yes, we have to do this. They said, who tricked you? And I said, college. Everybody in college, they tricked me. And they're like, what? I said, they taught me how to think, and now I can't shut it off. I realized that what college about, besides being a great experience, sometimes I had too many really, really good experiences that had a lot of colors to them. But the experience was amazing. But what was more importantly is that it made me to think critically. It taught me critical thinking, but it wasn't like a class on critical thinking, but everything you did was about large systems and breaking them down and thinking critically and solving problems or attempting to solve problems. And people will beat up these liberal arts colleges, and I would say, you know what? One of the biggest things when I talk to executives, what they want are people that can think critically and solve problems. That's what business is about, is solving problems. And the higher you get, when you get up to that VP, that C-suite level, it's all about solving the problems that no one else can. And the thing I love about human-centered design and creating consumer experiences is we want those people that work with the consumer every single day, those frontline folks on the phone, those people that are in the doctor's office, that are welcoming people into the office or ignoring them. We want them to really focus on that experience for that patient or that member. My first real experience in terms of human-centered design came around 2013. I was invited to attend a week-long class in innovation engineering. And it was an amazing class. And it was a hell of a week-long training session. Having been in the learning field for now 30 years, at that time about 25, it was probably the worst design class ever. And it was some of the most valuable information that I've ever experienced. So I've been doing human-centered design and innovation for the last 5 years. However, I've been doing instructional systems design for over 25 years. I'm going to say 30. I might be rounding up, might be 28, whatever. I started at age 18 in the military with an instructional system design model that was simple. It was task, condition, standard. And I was horrible. If you were in my class in the late 80s, and I'm still in college, not a teacher yet, you might have had the worst experience in your life taking a training session from me at the age of 18. I mean, honestly, who's a great facilitator at age 18? Okay, there's a couple of you. But I was creating experiences that were just to get the content out there, and it wasn't engaging, it wasn't interesting, it wasn't anything that honestly anyone would want to pay for. And I learned from those early failures. But it was a great precursor to everything that I wanted to do as it relates to human-centered design. In the learning world, for hundreds of years, they've been putting learners at the center of their instruction. Whether you're in high school or college professors really not so much, or in the corporate training world, they put the learner in the center. They work with the extremes, kind of like we do with human-centered design. Mostly, though, we look at the exemplars, the people that are experts in the field. We don't look at the worst of the worst in the learning world, or the ones that don't do something. We typically look at that, but they're very close cousins, the instructional system design world as well as the human-centered design world. The tools are a little different, the language is a little bit different, but very close. So if people ask me how long I've been doing design, I can say almost 30 years. If they ask me human-centered design, and I'll tell them up front that it's been about 5 years, and I love it. I think it's a noble calling. I don't have the formal training. It makes me a little bit feel like an imposter, and at the same time, I realized again what college taught me was how to learn, how to think critically, and getting stuff done is the most important thing. Okay. The biggest barriers to success right now, I've been on my own really since January of 2017. I've worked as a contractor with a couple of different organizations providing services, and now I've got a client, a large contract that's coming to an end in April. And the biggest barriers for me right now is scalability. It's something that we talk about in the human-centered design world a lot of the time, or UX UI, from a platform perspective. The biggest barrier right now is I am a company of one plus an intern, amazing intern, who is helping me do some of this stuff. But it's really hard to do business development when you're thinking about a 12-week design sprint that results in 4 to 5 prototypes. That includes curriculum that's taught every couple of weeks. That includes experiential learning, getting people out of the office, bringing in consumers, going out to consumers, and so forth, and also building a client list. So that's been my biggest barrier, and I know some of my friends and colleagues who have their own business face the same thing. What has the journey been so far? Honestly, the journey has been pretty amazing. I've only had my own company, or been on my own, let me put it like that. I think having your own company means you actually are paying multiple people and payroll and benefits, and while we have some of that, it's not at the scale of some other organizations that I admire very much. So with the journey, in the corporate world, corporations have, especially Fortune 100s, we have resources. That R word, that's amazing. You have the ability to get resources, to influence, get budget. When you're on your own, it's pretty much you're wearing every single hat that you could in a corporation, whether it be business development, as I talked about earlier, or whether it be designing content, experiential learning, creating experiences for your consumer, for yourself. The biggest difference is resources and scalability. The benefit of being self-employed, though, is it's amazing. I think, this point in time in my life is both terrifying and amazingly freeing. I have tons of flexibility in my life. If I have to take one of my kids to Atlanta for a 3-day volleyball tournament, after being on site at a client site for a week, I can do that, and that's the best part about being self-employed. I also have an opportunity to work with a variety of different companies and organizations, not just a single one. So again, I mean, neither is better or worse than the other. They're just different perspectives. And as I said, in terms of what I've struggled with being self-employed, it's keeping that pipeline going while I want to focus on being creative. I think what that means is I need to hire a biz dev type of person. So give me a shout if you want to work on commission only. There are a number of existing podcasts out there like Service Design and HCD and some other ones that talk about innovation and human-centered design, and I'll put those in the show notes. But the one that really inspired me was Mark Maron and the WTF podcast. I was probably at the lowest point in my life. I had been hit by a car, walking across the street, working in healthcare, by an executive in the healthcare that I knew. I really struggled from a cognitive standpoint. I struggled at times remembering what my name was, where I worked, and why I was in that big pink building downtown Louisville. And it was scary. I was scared out of my mind. It was one of those situations that I don't wish upon anyone. And, when I heard Mark Maron's podcast, again, what he was doing in those days, and this is, I think I want to say 5 or 6 years ago. It's been a while, but he had started out, I think I got hooked onto him at about episode in the 50s. And he was at a pretty low point in his life. He had really struggled with his career. He had some good success. He had some challenges, drugs and alcohol. Luckily, I didn't have that. But what he did was he brought us into the world of people, comedians especially, that I admired growing up. I remember interviews with some of the greats that we have lost since then, and some of the newest comedians. He's branched out and he's speaking to musicians and actors and so forth, and I think that's great. He's even interviewed some people multiple times over the course of the last few years. In any case, what Mark did is he made it real. He made the whole process. He made the people real. He brought in people that he knew initially, and through word of mouth, and as his popularity gained, he got people that he never could have imagined, I think, to work with him. But it brought us sometimes into the whole creative aspect of what's it like to be a comedian. I think I'm hilarious. I think I'm funny, and my kids have no respect. Sorry, Rodney. That's not a Rodney Dangerfield, brain injury at work here. That's not a Rodney Dangerfield reference, although you can take it that way. But a lot of, I think I'm funny, but, there's a process to being a really, really good comedian. And a lot of that is really hard work and repetition. Iterating on your act, iterating on what works and what doesn't work, So actually, I never thought about this, but there's a lot between what comedians do in their process, at least as I understand it from Mark Maron and his interviews, that we do. And I hope to bring that same sort of insight, I think, to other people, to you, to practitioners. I think there are a lot of different ways to do things. I don't want to try to pass judgment as much as possible. I'm a very judgy person, and I need to be open about that. If I see or hear something going way off the path around human-centered design and some of our major principles, I will call a timeout, and we will regroup, and we'll move forward. So I do have a very, I think, a very informed point of view, but sometimes it's about style points, right? And so, like Mark, I hope what I can do, not bring in comedians, although that would be kind of cool, is to bring in experts so that you can have the insights into their world, into what they do. And if I can do that, if I can do this for 3 months or 6 months, and 3 people listen to it, honestly, I'll consider it a success. Because, to be honest, as much as this is for you, I am a lifelong learner as well. And I'm hoping to be able to learn as much as I can with you. Know that I'm in this with you as much as anyone else, and that I think we're gonna get some really interesting insights. And it's not going to be the people that don't do the actual work. There's other podcasts, and I'll list those. They're amazing people. They're leading great efforts. They're doing some amazing work, like at Samsung and other really amazing large organizations. That's not what this is about. This is about rolling up your sleeves and getting dirty, facilitating change, facilitating the design of new products and services and experiences for the consumer. And who am I going to work with? Who do I work with now? Honestly, the field's pretty wide open, and hopefully through this podcast, we'll work with those who are recommended by others. We'll be able. Hopefully, there are a couple that I do consider thought leaders, and they're actively engaged in the process of designing new experiences. Hopefully, eventually, I'll have that to share with Mark Maron, who's had every major comedian on his podcast. That we'll be able to get some of those on as well. My emergency plan. Hey, if this shit doesn't work out, I can always go back to my day job. Right now it's sometimes a morning, a day, and a night job. But it inspires me. This kind of work, taking these kind of risks, putting my voice out there, for the love of God, this is the second take on this, and I'm so tired of hearing myself talk right now. Again, don't have to worry about that in the future. We'll have many much less of Steve talking and more of other people talking. But I can always go to my day job, and hopefully I can continue to do this. At first, I'm looking at every other week publication, hopefully getting to weekly. Once we get our production processes up, we're actually taking a human-centered design approach to this. I'm doing a business model canvas as well. In my mind, I promise I will write it out. Thank you, Alex. Shout out to Business Model Canvas folks. You are crazy, crazy cool people. And all the lean thinking people and all the other crazy people that are out there trying to make a difference for consumers. Love you guys. This is for you. That's what this podcast is about. Bringing your experiences. So if you've got experience and expertise, and you want to share that, send me your name. Send me 2 or 3 references of clients that you've worked with, whether it's internal or external. I will vet you. There is no vetting process, but we will iterate on that too. And if you got the background and experience, and you want to share your thoughts around human-centered design, we'll do that. I think I've got a list of about 50 now, but those should go pretty quickly, and hopefully we can get other experts in there and other thought leaders. So, in the future, remember, it's all about getting shit done. GSD.
I never wanted to say, I never wanted to say, I never wanted to say goodbye. I never wanted to say goodbye. As much as true, the bets on you to lose. And all say goodbye.